All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome. My name is Elin Titus, and I will be moderating this webinar about AI for graphic design. Before I introduce today's speakers, a couple of practical things. The webinar is being recorded, and we will share the link to the recording and presentation material afterwards. You can ask questions by clicking on the Q&A icon on the bottom, and try to keep your questions short and concise. The presentation will be about 40 to 45 minutes, and after that, we'll answer questions, as many as we have time for until 5 minutes to 1. So let me introduce today's speakers. Jumoke is a Berlin-based designer working with new technologies such as AR and AI. She specializes in content creation and production for the entertainment industry, where she works on many campaigns, apps, and games for clients like Netflix, Universal, Bandai, and Nickelodeon. Welcome, and great to have you on the webinar, Jumoke.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Anders is the CEO of Klingit and responsible for the strategy and implementation of AI at Klingit. It's great to have you here as well, Anders.
Great to be here.
And myself, I have a background as a CMO and client of Klingit, and I am your moderator. As you know, AI has exploded the last few months, and hundreds of new tools are being released every month. And our ambition with this webinar is both to present real-life examples Klingit has done, and we will also share our recommended top 6 AI tools for you to get started. And these 6 tools are the results of evaluation of more than 50 different AI tools. We'll also cover some of the risks and introduce Klingit's brand new AI product, which is a model where you can use generative AI, but where a lot of the risks are mitigated. But more about that later. Anders, before we start, could you give us an introduction to what Klingit does and how Klingit differs from traditional design agencies?
Yes, sure. So Klingit is a subscription service for all your design needs. So from creating visual identities from scratch to a website, ads, PowerPoint presentations, or video to social media, Klingit got you covered. So we are a team now of 60 designers, project managers, and developers working with more than 100 clients as their design production partner. And with our delivery model, we deliver design faster, smoother, and more cost-efficient than, for example, other traditional agencies. And we often work as an integrated part of in-house teams or marketing teams and help them get their design done. And working with design, we have built it around our own design ops platform, which makes it very easy to create briefs and projects. And this is also a digital interface where the client can see all their ongoing projects and get all the files and communication in one place. So technology has been the core of Klingit since day one. And recently we have invested also a lot in generative AI, which I'm super excited to share more about during this webinar.
Great, thank you. So let's start with a short intro on generative AI. Jumoke, could you briefly explain what generative AI is, how it can be used, and what a prompt is?
Yeah, for sure. So, we've probably all played around with some form of generative AI tool, maybe ChatGPT or DALL-E or Midjourney. But essentially what a generative AI tool is an AI system that outputs something, it generates something. And that's why it's called generative AI. And we're in such an interesting space at the moment because everything is moving so fast. There's so many tools released each week. It's even hard for people that work in the space to keep up with it. But it's also very exciting as well. And I think one of the main direct use cases that we come across is actually in terms of the prompting, right? And the text to essentially everything. So we have a couple of different categories listed on the screen: text, video, images, code, audio, but there's so much more you can do with text prompting too. There's even been text to 3D, text to textures, all sorts of things released in the last few months. So it's a very interesting time to work in this space. So when we say text to 3D or text to image, what we're talking about is that text is a prompt. So here on the screen, we have like a couple of examples of prompting. So there's a couple of different levels, and depending on the tool, you need to take a different approach. But here we have an example from Midjourney. And on the left, there's a basic prompt. And we'd consider this a basic prompt because there's not really very much indication of the style or anything for that matter. It's just a bee flying in the sky. And on the right, we have a slightly more complex prompt because we have added some more details for what we want that output to look like. But you can go even further with your prompting.
Cool. Thank you, Jimoki. Anders, could you tell us about Klingit's approach to generative AI?
Yeah, it's like Jimoki said, it's super exciting times and things are happening so fast. Our approach is that we have seen that we can leverage generative AI in design in different stages. So we focus on the briefing stage, idea generation, production, and also testing of creative assets. Then at Klingit, we have design teams in each specialty area within design. So from motion to UX, 3D, presentation, illustration, and so on. And within each of these disciplines, there are a number of use cases and specific tools that can be used. So we divided our team in dedicated AI squads, you could say, within each discipline to really, first of all, just embrace and stay on top of this development, explore what can be used and evaluate different tools. And then when we find something and we see it works, we execute and really implement it in our processes and ways of working to be able to deliver more value faster to our clients.
Cool, thank you. So let's look at some cases. We will show 4 cases today, and we'll spend the most time on the first one about 3D animations, and the other 3 cases will be presented more shortly. With that said, over to you, Jimoki.
Thank you. Yeah. So this was a really exciting project to work on because it presented somewhat of a challenge. We wanted to create a 3D simulation video, which was super high quality and didn't give you the feel that you were watching something which was AI generated or AI assisted. So we took this case study for Lipton, and I just have to note that Lipton isn't one of our clients in this case. But yeah, here's some examples of the output. I think, yeah. So you're probably wondering, yeah, how did we do this? But before we look at that, let's think about how long it would take to make this with a traditional pipeline. So I have a lot of experience creating 3D assets from a production standpoint for video games or for motion graphics like you saw before. And for something like this, you could be looking at around 80 days to produce a video like this. Because, you know, what's really cool about AI is that you're able to create assets which are unique to your project. So it's not a case of, you know, going onto an online website or the Unity store and buying an asset. All of those assets that we saw in the video are unique. And if we wanted to texture all of those by hand, it would take a long time. And with the help of AI, we were able to really shave off a lot of time and essentially produce this in under 10 days in the end. And so if we wanted to scale it further, we see that we'd be able to do this this level of production within 2 to 3 days. So how did we do it? We've broken it down into environment and then motion a little bit later on. But the main thing was these very high quality textures. We really wanted it to feel premium. We wanted it to look super realistic. So we used Midjourney to create our peaches and our leaves that would be in the video. And we also used Midjourney to generate the backgrounds. And I can't emphasize enough how amazing it is to be able to just generate anything you can imagine, right? Of course, in this case, we wanted to go for some sort of gradient background, but you could do anything, and you can do anything really quickly. So it's really incredible to be able to work with tools that give you so many options so quickly.
Okay. A question on those textures that you mentioned, how long would that take without AI? How would you do those?
Yeah. So I think, again, it's to do with the fact that they're all unique, right? We can generate, if we want 10 peaches, we can actually have each one of them having a unique texture within 5 minutes. And if we wanted to create those by hand, possibly with a little bit of painting or this kind of thing, you could be looking at, a couple of days per peach, which in comparison, we can do all of the peaches in a couple of minutes.
Wow, that's really impressive.
And yes, so another tool that we discovered, we're always looking for the newest tools out there. And we found this website or this tool called Monster Mash. And Monster Mash essentially allows you to create a 3D model from an image through inflation. So we use this for not only the Lipton logo, as you see here, but also for the peaches. We played around with this too. And it's a very cool tool because you can also animate directly inside it. And then onto the animation. So we didn't just use AI to create the assets that you see in the video. We also used AI to actually make the animations. So with ChatGPT, it's very good at generating Python scripts. And if you know anything about 3D modeling or Blender animations, then you would know that you can actually create an animation in Blender using a Python script. So with a little bit of advanced prompting, we were able to create some animation scripts directly in ChatGPT, which we then took into Blender, and then you can see the final result. I think, it's one of those, there's lots of different levels of prompting, right? And especially for the animations, it can be quite hard to get ChatGPT to do what you want. But with some advanced prompting and also reverse prompting, so maybe saying to ChatGPT, hey, can you help us to craft a prompt for an animation script? Then you can actually get some very cool results in the end.
Jamuki, how have you learned to write the prompts? Is it learning by doing, or have you taken a course?
Yeah, so I never took any course. I think, with all of these tools, as the space moves so quickly as well, and there's always new updates and this kind of thing, you really just need to jump into it and learn by iteration. Yeah, so not only do we use ChatGPT to create the animations, but also the scene setup as well. So, for example, you could say, hey, ChatGPT, pretend you're an expert in Blender and craft a beautiful product shot, which would win many design awards, something like this. And then for the final step, we decided to use AI to also speed up our rendering process. So if you know anything about the 3D pipeline, you know that rendering can take a long time, and it's in general one of the most difficult parts of the project, right? Because you're just waiting for this thing to render. But using AI and what we call frame interpolation, so being able to basically imagine these frames in between the frames, we're able to speed up our rendering process. We don't need to render videos at the speed that we want them in the end. We can render them much shorter and then use AI to actually make that video longer. So when we look at this, not only were we able to kind of produce this video, which is very high quality. You wouldn't really know that AI was involved, saving a lot of time and as a result costs. But it was also a lot of work, right? And we needed to design this workflow from scratch. And it's not sort of a case of clicking a button and then it happens. It's more, okay, we want to have the specific result. So how do we engineer this pipeline to get to that?
So this is really impressive. A question: when you've done the model, like how easy is it to make new ones? Let's say you want to switch the peach to a lemon or change the can to a bottle.
Yeah, I mean, this would be very easy now. So once you have the scene set up, it's not a problem at all to generate new assets to replace them with. So we could, for example, change the can to a sneaker and then have the peaches as basketballs, and that wouldn't be very hard at all.
Yeah, I just think this also opens up so many opportunities also for brands that previously had not afford to be able to do these kind of assets, and now it's available. So it's really interesting to see how brands can work with these kind of animations ahead.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Timoki.
Thank you.
We have 3 other cases that Anders now will present shortly. So over to you, Anders.
Yeah, thank you, Elin. Yeah, excited to share a bit on other cases as well, where we leverage generative AI in our projects. One example is for a client where we generated images and illustrations as part of their visual identity that we created for them. And with this, we added a lot more variation to their content in a very short time frame. And also when we used this, we sparked a lot of new creative ideas and fueled creativity in the project with the visual identity itself. In the project, one of the deliverables when we packaged the visual identity was also a prompt library. So the client could continue to explore and create new images by themselves after the project has ended. And prompts as a deliverable is something that we see gets more and more common in the projects we do for our clients. So that's an exciting development, I think. We also use generative AI in the briefing stage to improve the brief. And this is one example from a web design project where we very quickly generated visual ideas on various directions based on their visual identity. So basically, in a very short time frame, create different styles and then gather feedback from the client. Which direction do they want to go? And then our designers and our team can go from there. And that saved a lot of time in the setup phase, and also help the client to come up with what they wanted much faster than without AI. And the third example is, there are so many examples we could share, but I really wanted to highlight this one. I think is quite nice. It's where we created product images for a client. So we created a collection of different product images for a number of business categories that they use their clients work with. So, and these images are then used on their website and also for social media content. And we were able to match the style and visual identity of the brand in all examples by using their brand colors as a golden thread. So you can have a common theme around each image. And with generative AI, it's so easy to create a wide range of examples. And so when they add a new industry, it's easy to create new images for that, and saves a lot of time and money for the client to be able to have these images generated with generative AI.
Yeah, very interesting to see so many different use cases. Now you are going to talk a little bit about the risks and how this can be mitigated. So over to you again.
Yeah. As we see now in these examples, and there are plenty more where we leverage generative AI, the potential and opportunities are massive, but there are also a lot of limitations and risks related to the use of generative AI. And one of the main risks is definitely the legal and copyright risk. So I think it's super important to be aware of how these models have, on what data they have been trained on, and really follow the legal development. At Klingit, we work closely with a law firm specializing in this to just be aware of what's happening so we could adapt to the regulations that are coming. Today, it's still a lot of gray zone because technology moves faster than the legislators, but more and more. And I think that's really good that it's starting to come regulation. So keep track on that is key. Another way that is important for us is also to be very transparent with your clients if you use generative AI and how, so the clients are aware. And some of our clients are really encouraging us and want to explore this and want to create a lot of assets with AI, while other clients don't want us to use it at all. And both works good, but just be transparent what we do. And I think also to mitigate the risks of copyright and the legal side, it's important to use more ethical models ahead. I mean, you mitigate some of the risk by using, for example, Adobe Firefly, which are trained on the content which are licensed. And we are also now, I think soon we will launch a solution where you can train an AI model on your brand's own content. And I will share a bit more about that soon. I can share about it now. And it's really about to reduce the risk and be a more ethical alternative, ensuring brand consistency. So in this solution, we will offer our clients the custom-made models for their brand, and the model is trained on their own assets that they share with us. It's built on one of the most ethical models where artists and creators can remove their content and data sets, unlike many other models like Midjourney, for example. And then we can offer clients to set up a custom model from where they then can create a number of assets, including illustration, vectors, images, and 3D renders, all based on their own brand style and the content that they have provided. So I think this is an exciting development that we will see now with more ethical models and more controlled environments, you could say, which will reduce some of the risk. It will not take it away completely, but at least you will reduce it. And more and more things will come. And we will share more about this model in the coming weeks, and I think it will be a fantastic opportunity for brands. But if we can go back to the slide, because this is the kind of legal side of it, touched upon briefly. We also see limitations and risk around brand consistency and really the expertise. Because now with generative AI, it's easy to create a lot of content. But I think it will be key then to keep the brand together and ensure brand consistency and not just create a lot of things that are not attached to each other. So, and also the high quality will be a differentiator, especially when it's easy to create a lot of content. The really high quality content will be the key. So what we see is really to combine talented designers and creatives with expertise in generative AI and those tools. And the combination of designers and AI tools, that is the key success factor. The last risk I just wanted to address is also about confidentiality. I think that's key also when we talk about these tools. Never insert confidential or sensitive data in, for example, ChatGPT, because you lose control of that data and it's not confidential anymore. So to really be aware of this, at Klingit, we early on created our own internal AI usage policy, which I recommend all companies to have. And then also to train all coworkers about the risks and how to mitigate them. So everyone is aware of the limitations and risks with all these tools.
All right. Thank you, Anders. And so it's very cool to see the potential, what you can do with these tools. Jamoki, if I want to get started at my company using these tools, which ones would you recommend and why?
So I would definitely have a play around with Midjourney. I think that it's extremely useful, even if you don't go into super complex prompting or anything like this. I think it's great for creating concepts. And, for example, if you're working with a marketing team and you already have somewhat of an idea of what you want the campaign to look like, you can already try to kind of create an image that will inspire them and push them in the right direction. So for sure, I would say that Midjourney is a great one to use internally. And the second one is HeyGen. And it's a little bit like the more popular tool, Synthesia. And it basically allows you to create explainer videos. But I include this one because it also has the use of more stylized avatars and just a wider tool set in general. But I really see that this being very useful for onboarding videos, or, maybe you don't need to have a person each time to onboard people. Maybe you can just create a fictional employee that can onboard people. And even just bringing documents to life, you can actually just input, say you have a long briefing, you could put that into HeyGen and make it into just a 5-minute video, which would explain the topic. So I think that this one would be very cool. And then we have SoundDraw, which makes music, which is probably a little bit more if you're on the marketing or production design side of things. But what's very cool about it is that you have a lot of different moves that you can choose from, and you can be very specific in terms of what you want the length of it to be and the general feeling, combining different styles. So I'd say that if you're interested in exploring music with generative tools, as it's not fully AI, it's more generative, then I'd definitely check out SoundDraw. And then for more sort of advanced users, a very interesting project just released called 3D Fi. And it basically allows you to create 3D models from text prompts. It's a little bit limited, so you can't create everything. They have specific categories that you can prompt within. But still, I see it as being very cool if you are working with any sort of 3D production. And the second one on the more advanced users is Ybot. And you would notice that I didn't have ChatGPT anywhere here. And that's because Ybot is essentially using the ChatGPT plugin, but instead of when you ask it a question, you get one answer. When you ask it a question, you get a full mind map as the answer. And I use this myself all the time. I think it's very, very cool. I use it way more than I use ChatGPT, actually, at this point. It's definitely great for any sort of ideation. If you want to come up with sort of a concept, or even if you want to validate an idea you have, it's like you can just ask it and then it can give you 1,000 reasons why that's the right thing to do. And then the third one is Polycam. And Polycam allows you to create 3D textures for models. And there's a couple of different tools like this on the market, but I really like Polycam. I think that it produces really high quality results, which are production ready. So that's why that one's in there. I think like the main thing to keep in mind when you're trying these tools is just to be really open and just experiment. No one is watching, just have some fun, especially with Midjourney. I think you really learn by doing in this case. There's definitely a lot of tutorials online that you can watch as well, but nothing is better than some practical experience.
Oh. And what makes the tools to the right more suitable for advanced users?
So I'd say it's a combination of what you would need to sort of use them. So for example, 3D model isn't really useful to everyone, right? And I think that in general, you need to ask the right questions, especially with Ybot, for example, because you're getting this full mind map each time. You really need to be specific and have a little bit more structured prompting in order to actually get the results you want. With Ybot, you also don't have unlimited prompts per day. So you just need to be aware that if you don't have a ChatGPT API, then you only have 5 chances to get your prompt right. So that's why I'd say it's a little bit more advanced.
Hey, cool. And that was the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening and hope you enjoyed it. We will share the link to the recording and the material afterwards. And if you want to know more about Klingit, you can visit the website or contact Klingit team. And now we will answer your questions. Jumoke, you gave some tips on which tools to start with. But if I want to become really good at this, how should I go about it?
So I would say that it really depends what tool you're trying to use. I think with Midjourney, it's really just a case of iterating a lot. I think there are a lot of tutorials online, but not all of them are really teaching you prompting structure and this kind of thing. And the reason why I say that it's very good to just get practical experience is because, once you are watching other people's prompts and looking at your own prompts, making your own prompts, seeing what sort of results are coming up, nothing can sort of compare to that. Watching a video is great for, more structural format-based information. If you want to learn how to do prompt weighting and this kind of thing, for sure, I would recommend watching a tutorial. But just to create your own style and get good at it, I would say that, it just takes time, like any craft.
So another question, looks cool, exclamation mark. What prompt did you use to get the peach leaves and backgrounds?
So I can't remember the exact one now because it's a couple of months ago, but it would probably have been something like super realistic, detailed peach on a white background, stock image shot on a Leica M10, something like this.
Cool. We have another question. Jumoke mentioned that she has a learning by doing approach when trying new AI tools. Can she describe that process? Does she take certain steps to determine the usefulness of an AI tool? For example, does she watch YouTube clips, follow certain forums, search for use cases, and if yes, where? Or follow certain developers she looks up to? Same question may apply to Anders, of course.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of different tools being released, and you need to be able to sort of structure your time and decide whether it's even worth dipping your toes into it. A lot of the tools you maybe only try once to see, okay, does it actually work like it did in the marketing video? And then you don't use it again because you don't have a use case for it. I think in general, one of the main tools I use is Stable Diffusion. And when I'm trying to learn or keep up to date with what's going on in that space, then I actually use their subreddit because it's an open source community and a lot of them are working in that space and sharing their work and their processes. So this is one way that I learn in this case.
Anders? Add on that as well, I mean, from a personal perspective, I also follow a lot of people on different forums and watch YouTube tutorials, ask ChatGPT on how to become an expert in something, and then you have a kind of bullet list on things to do for a while. So that's one way you can kind of develop your own skills. But I also, from like an organizational perspective, and what I'm trying to do at Klingit is also to make sure that coworkers and people have time to really explore. As Jumoke said, it's just about exploration, trial and error. So you need to kind of invest time in it. I think that is one key for organization to really develop their skills and encourage usage, and also create forums where coworkers and an organization can share knowledge and tips and tricks with each other, and then build the knowledge on each other's experiments. I think that is all good steps to kind of keep up with it.
Cool. Cool. We have some more questions. What AI tools have you tested to create UX UI design? UWizard Auto Designer, Galileo.ai, or any recommendations?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting space, I would say, and I think it's the next frontier in a way. Vector output and all of this kind of thing. I have tried Wizard. I think that it's very useful, especially for mockups. But in terms of most companies and system designers, I think they would be completely heartbroken if you tried to pull them away from Figma, and it would mean a complete restructuring of an organization. So I'm very interested in Galileo, actually, because that works within Figma. And there's a lot of different Figma plugins as well, which you can use if you're a UX UI designer. So for example, there are some which help with generating the copy or certain specific imagery within the mockup that you've already designed. And just recently, a couple of days ago, there was a plugin release which allows you to create vector icons and this kind of thing, which is very cool too.
For the product images, did you create a prompt with ChatGPT and then put it into Midjourney?
So for that one, we actually just did it from scratch. Yeah.
And what are your thoughts of Midjourney versus Adobe Firefly?
So, with all tools, there's always it's hard to compare them, right? Adobe Firefly is trained on licensed material, so it's a much safer option. You're able to do in-painting and out-painting. And when I say that, I mean, either selecting a part of an image and regenerating that part or expanding the image beyond its borders, which you're not able to do in Midjourney. But in general, Midjourney has super high quality results, which they feel a little bit more tasteful sometimes than Firefly. So I think it really depends on what your use case is. I really enjoy prompting in Midjourney and then taking that into Firefly to change details, actually. So a little bit more of a hybrid workflow.
Can anyone use your created AI image, or is it only you?
So on Midjourney, if you do you mean in terms of copyright or?
I don't know. It's not my question.
Okay.
See if that's clarified a little later on. We'll take the next one. Thanks for a great presentation. How can we use AI to automate our design work in InDesign? Do you have an example?
So I would actually check out the beta apps from Adobe because I think that there might be something that they are working on in that space, but I'm not entirely sure what it is. For example, they just released for Illustrator to recolor your vectors with a text prompt, so you can there's some AI implementation coming for all of their tools. That's what I'm saying. So I'm curious to see what they have for InDesign.
Yeah. And I can touch on that question about the Midjourney images. There are different user accounts that you can have. So, and they all is similar with a lot of different tools. So if you have a pro account, which is a paid account, then then you can use the images on a commercial basis. So that's kind of the ownership, right? But then, of course, you need to be aware of the copyright issues and how sensitive it might be. But that's how the regulation from Midjourney is. So have a pro account, and then you can use it on a commercial level.
Next question. Will Klingit produce a course/provide consultancy to help other companies to implement a similar process? Set up a team, teach how to use specific tools, etc.?
Yeah, it's something that we do already today, I would say, for our clients. Ask us about how to kind of train them within AI. So that's something that we can do. And then regarding setting up the process and so on, it depends on, it's also something that we can do, of course. If some clients want us just to produce the content, like the case that Yumoki showed, while others want us to be more involved themselves so they can share the knowledge and kind of build up their own competence going forward. So yes, either way, just reach out and let's talk.
Jumoki, what do you think about Photoshop's beta version of AI?
Yeah, I think it's quite cool. I really love to use it for the in-painting of images and also extending images. For example, I was working on a deck last week and I generated an image in Midjourney, but I stupidly forgot to tell it what the aspect ratio should be. So I got a square image out, but I love this image and I wanted to use it. So I just dropped it into Photoshop and then I extended it to be the dimensions that I needed. So it's super useful for sure.
With content so accessible, especially in volume and with sparing client time, how do you think the pricing model will shift? I guess that's to you, Anders.
Yeah, I think it will be quite interesting to see that development in the creative industry and the design world, agency world going forward, because it will be a lot of changes. I think our model at Klingit, we are a subscription-based model, so you pay a certain amount each month, and then you have capacity from our design team on a specific number of hours. I think it's much easier for us to adapt and be able to deliver value on that model compared to other agencies, more traditional ones that are, the whole business model is built around being able to bill a lot of hours for very extensive and big projects. I think they will find it very challenging going forward. Well, the way we see it at Klingit is really that we are a subscription-based service, and we want to provide as much value as efficient as possible during those hours. And if we spend those hours on drafting prompts and delivering generative AI, or if we do it by our illustrators illustrating things by hand, it doesn't matter for us.
Another question, how do you insert people in content, people from your organization, for example, to blend AI content with photos of a CEO?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different ways you could do that. Photoshop has been mentioned a couple of times. So
do you have any process when it comes to scouting for new AI tools, or how do you determine what to use?
At Klingit, we have a quite structured approach within these different areas. So in the exploration phase, we just type in new tools, and then we have this short kind of evaluation phase. So we have a long list of tools, and then a short list, and then a selected ones that we use. So that's one way that we do it. And as Jumoki said, new tools emerge every day, so you need to stay on top of it. But a lot of the new tools that comes out, when you test them are not good. So for some tools, you kind of realize very quickly that it's not for us, and then you move on. So that's how we work with it. I think it's important to have some kind of structure around it, and also to align the forces in the organization around a few selected ones that you kind of really build deep knowledge within. What you say, Jumoki? How do you keep up with everything happening?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much each day, and as I said, it really feels like even if you are completely immersed in this world, there's still too many papers released to keep up with, to read them all. But I think it's just a case of actually not being overwhelmed by it and actually thinking, well, what do I actually need? And there's so many tools out there, but we don't actually need most of them for our pipelines, right? So it's just a case of, what is the outcome, and then building the perfect pipeline based on this.
any recommended AI tools to support / extend your own style as a graphic artist / illustrator?
Yep. So there's a couple of different ways you could do it. You could even play around with Midjourney. Midjourney has a blending mode where you can blend different images. So you could play around with blending some of your illustrations and seeing if something cool comes out. But if you wanted to have something slightly more custom, then you can actually train a model on your style. And this would be done through Stable Diffusion. And then you'd be able to generate more images in this style.
Would you be able to elaborate a bit on how you've been able to provide prompts as deliverables to customers, e.g. how you figured out pricing and if it would finish prompts or rather instructions on what adjectives to use for a certain result?
In the cases where we, in the visual identity case and other cases where we have prompts as a deliverable, we have packaged them as part of the deliverable. So it's been a document, you could say, about each prompt and also an introduction to how they are built up. And also if the client want to continue to explore some examples on how they can tweak it and kind of elaborate on it. And so we have, in terms of pricing, that has been just part of the deliverable, and just like another deliverable like the images or illustration or the logo. So it's part of the package of what we give to the client. So no other pricing model for the prompt compared to other deliverables that we have. It's part of the ongoing design as a service subscription.
Sure. Timothy, can you explain more about the render with AI? Did you use some kind of plugin or just Python code?
For speeding up the rendering, we rendered the video in Blender, and then we used Runway. And Runway is very cool machine learning AI company. They also released Gen 1 and Gen 2, which allows you to restyle videos or create videos from text prompts. But they have a whole set of what they call magic tools, which are AI-based tools related to video production. And one of them is this super slow-mo, which essentially does this frame interpolation between the scenes to make the video longer. So we rendered it in Blender, and then we brought it into Runway to get the final result.
Cool. How do you experience AI and prompt writing in other languages? Does it perform best in English?
It does perform best in English, and this is because the base data set that the majority of the models are using was trained in English. So essentially, you can imagine that you have an image of a beach with a deck chair and it's sunny and there's seagulls in the sky. And the data set says, okay, this is a deck chair. This is a deck chair. This is the sun. This is a seagull. And it does that for 5 billion images. And all of that was done using English. So the majority of the time when you have a translation, like there's only 2 other languages. I think there's Chinese and there's a new one just released, Japanese Stable Diffusion, and there's Russian. But any other language, it's actually just like Google Translate, basically.
One question also, Jamoki. The new service that we will launch now when we enable brands to upload their own content and then train a model based on that, how do you think those kind of solutions will benefit brands going forward compared to using these more general models?
Yeah, I think for sure, like even in terms of the language one, right, as we can offer the ability to prompt in different languages. If you try to do that in Midjourney, it just doesn't work, right? And so we can actually create an environment which is safer and more inclusive to be producing images. And definitely in terms of all of the copyright stuff too, this is definitely a game changer because we can create a framework for image generation which is ethical. And the majority of the platforms that we're talking about, like Midjourney and just the base level of Stable Diffusion, it's all trained on scraped images from the internet, right? And so I'm really excited about this product, actually, because I think that it can massively benefit agencies or companies that want to work with AI in a way which is more sustainable.
Yeah, I'm also super excited about that. And I think we will see more and more of that going forward also.
We have a couple of minutes left. Another question. Normally Midjourney creates everything from scratch and the same prompt can result in very different results. If I create a style or person that I like, for example, in Midjourney, is there any possibility to save this exact style or person and create new images based on it?
Yes, so you can do it, but it doesn't work that well. But essentially, you should look up how to pull the seed from the Midjourney image, because all of the images that you generate, they do have a seed. It's just hidden. And you have to send a little message icon to the image within Discord. And then you get a DM from Midjourney with the seed. And then if you keep prompting with that seed, it should have the same style and it should be the same person, but it doesn't really work as well as training your own model does.
I think we should cover the copyright limitations. So, Anders, what does the regulation actually look like when it comes to copyright and legal risks?
Yes, that's a very good question. And as it is right now, it's kind of a gray zone because the technical development has happened so fast and the legislators are not coping up with that speed. But now we see more and more that they try. More and more regulations are coming. On European Union are working and is about to regulate this area in a short time. So, but I think in the US there's also legislations coming out, but I think European Union is moving faster. Just we need to stay close on the development and understand the risks. And I just like Jamoki said, and what we are soon will launch also to create more controlled training modules where you can mitigate those risks.
A follow-up question on that is, I heard somewhere that the company behind the AI, for example, ChatGPT, becomes the owner of generated content. Is this true?
Yeah, so it really depends on the tool, right? And this is why it's really important to get professional advice and actually set these sort of company guidelines, as Anders said, because with some image generation tools, if you put an image in, then you lose the copyright for it. And that's the same with ChatGPT. So it's just understanding what all of their terms of services are, actually.
Yeah, and being really careful, and especially like ChatGPT, if you insert confidential information there, you lose the confidentiality because it will be part of the data. So be careful and read through the agreements. It's critical.
All right. We're running out of time here. So, Jamoki and Anders, do you have a few more minutes, or should we close down?
Yes. Need to run to a new meeting, but it's super exciting to have this webinar, and thank you all for listening in. And if you have any other questions or just want to know more or do something together, just reach out, and we're happy to help.
Okay. Thank you everyone who attended, and we will share the recording and the material afterwards.
Great. Thank you everyone.
Thanks everyone.